And
Disagree with me, Jesse.
I do disagree.
Go for
because
it. There's plenty of causes that you can get attached to.
Yes.
But they all tend to have a dead end.
Especially men, have experienced the futility of not being chosen for a task.
The thing is like, who's a man? What's a man? Am I a man? Yes. Technically, yes. So
this is what Jesse thinks.
I'm ready. I'm strapped in.
What Jesse thinks is masculinity is very strongly culturally informed, which is why it's really hard to make it universal.
Interesting.
Because the Bible never defines masculinity.
Yes.
And so masculinity, I think, is more a project of applying wisdom in a context and a culture.
Yeah.
Than it is like an obedience of specific commands. And it makes sense why it's so confusing for guys to figure it out, because it's not red light means stop, green light means go.
So what are some examples of what that would look like in our culture and our context, just so that people, because that's a very theoretical concept, which I think I'm tracking with you, but what do you think that looks like?
We can't just talk about theory.
I mean, I would,
and give no examples.
I would love to.
You try and give me an example and I'll comment on it, because my brain just jumped into 14 different directions.
Okay. I'm gonna start getting into then the framework that I look at, how Matt sees masculinity.
Matt's take. Great.
So I'm gonna go to the first of the core components that I views masculinity in our context. And that would be pursuit of excellence.
Okay.
In a way, it's almost like it's ingrained into us from the time that we're boys. We want to be good at something.
Yeah.
And it may not even look like that. You may think, oh, well, there's a lot of guys who don't really do anything with their lives, and it seems like nothing's really going on with them. What the heck is that about? Well, I mean, you look at how much they play video games. They want to be really, really, really good at that.
Yeah.
That is sort of an outpouring of that desire to be excellent, so excellent at something that it bears the maximum amount of fruit. Right? When you're a kid and you're daydreaming, you don't daydream about being a mediocre firefighter or a fighter pilot. You daydream about being like
the best.
Another framework that you could look at it through is adding value. I think that's a big part of what separates masculine men from anything else on the planet. Is, I think there's another thing that Ryan Michler says, is a boy consumes more than he produces. A man produces more than he consumes. And
gosh, that's not true of our society.
No, it's not
that's
at all.
That's not true of men or women.
No. Yeah. We are consumers through and through, but pursuit of excellence helps you to have a framework for adding value to people around you. I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of guys end up frustrated, like, hey, why am I getting rejected by the girls all the time? It's like, we look at it from this framework of, we want somebody to just love us and accept us just as we are. We don't want it to be about having to do something. Even from a biblical standpoint, it can get a little muddy because I think a lot of the guys are expecting that, oh, if I'm just a good godly dude that reads my Bible and serves at the church sometimes, a good godly girl will only care about that. It's like, actually, no, that'll get you into the friend zone of like, hey, I love you as a brother in Christ. But how many guys are tired of hearing that phrase? It's no, you actually do have to be able to add tangible value to her life. And to do that, you're going to have to get good enough at something that you can produce. You can add value to the people around you. So what's your take on that?
My take on that is there's a lot of that I really resonate with because I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. I'm a which is an achiever. Like, I was playing basketball with a friend and he was saying whenever he misses a shot, it's my fault. But I was saying whenever I miss a shot, it's my fault. Like, it doesn't matter how good he's doing. It's always my fault that I didn't achieve excellence. Which is probably a problem of some kind. But I just very much, all that to say, I resonate with what you're saying.
By the way, this is all completely true. I can confirm I've known Jesse for a long time. This has always been one of the most competitive humans I've known, which is
It has its pluses and its minuses.
Yes.
Well, and I think my first thought is with this idea of achieving excellence or being competitive or wanting to just like do well or be excellent at something, is a neutral quality. It's morally neutral. And so competitiveness, my competitiveness, like for a long, growing up for me, it was kind of poo-pooed.
Yeah.
Because, which was kind of a drag. Like I was just like, oh, okay. I guess
it's wrong for me to be the way that I most naturally am.
For the way I am.
Yeah.
But what I ended up realizing is actually the Bible had a more sophisticated framework for me as someone who's really internally competitive, which is you can either manifest this desire for excellence or competitiveness you can allow that to be under the influence of the flesh or sin in a way that's going to tear down and cause harm.
Yeah.
Or it can be under the influence of the Spirit, which can actually not just build you up, but build others up too.
Yeah.
So it's a constructive reality instead of a deconstructive reality.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't my competitiveness that was the problem. It was what I was allowing to influence or drive or be in control of my competitiveness. That was the problem.
There's a book out there that a lot of young guys are reading right now, and it's the book that I was recommending to you. It's called "It's Good to Be a Man." It's by Michael Foster and somebody else, and he has an interesting framework that's kind of similar to that. The way that he says it is your desire to bend the earth to your will is not actually wrong. That's actually what it means to subdue the earth. And I mean, because that's a weird way to phrase it, because we're so used to thinking, oh, well, not my will be done, but God's will.
Yeah.
But the way that he frames it is actually that's the role of a son, is to take the Father's will and implement it. Things go wrong when we do that according to our own vision for what things should. So we're bending the world and the things around us to our own vision for what life should look like.
Yeah.
If nothing else, that's an interesting way of framing it. I think it's better that you bring up the sin versus
spirit dynamic.
Because I mean, what happens is we get so afraid of doing anything. We're so used, become so passive of like, I don't want to step on God's will, that we don't try to exert any will onto anything. We just open our hands and let everything pass through. We become sort of passive receivers of life instead of active shapers of it.
Yes. I would actually pretty much be in agreement with that observation. Okay. I think that's right. I think it's sort of something that's true of not just men, but women. Because in Genesis 1:28, where that comes from, it says it's a command to men and women who are both individually and collectively made in the image of God.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, I think the part of the reason we get masculinity and femininity so messed up is because we get what it means to be human so messed up. Yeah. Like it's like trying to fix the roof if the foundation is busted. Yeah. We're like, oh, the electrical's bad. And you're like, actually, there's no walls. And so,
yeah. So, I mean, that kind of throws a wrench into the whole process, because it's like, well, okay, so now we need to start over with being human beings again. I think
the Hobbit was written after the Lord of the Rings.
Okay. Yeah.
Same thing with Chronicles of Narnia. The first book is The Magician's Nephew.
Let's do that then. Let's go backwards. And I think that
we'll write the prologue later.
Yeah. There can be some value in changing your practices. I mean, we've talked about this quite a bit, but I think John Mark Comer is kind of onto something.
Yeah.
Your spiritual formation isn't done by like a lecture or a Bible study that you hear every once in a while.
100%.
It's done by the stuff you do every day.
Yeah.
But the stuff that you repeat, the thoughts that you rehearse, the things that you're thinking and saying and doing and hearing over and over again.
This goes back to something we said earlier, which was how you mentioned that quote by that guy who said, boys consume more than they produce, men produce more than they consume.
Yeah.
We're in a situation where we are practices.
Yeah.
We are trained and habituating consumerism. So no wonder.
Yeah.
Our practices are all messed up.
Yeah.
And
that works its way down into our core and affects the type of people that we that we become.
So
I think like what you were saying at the beginning about how masculinity is very culturally contextual. I think that part of the reason why I gravitated towards these 5 sort of core components is because they're the pieces that we struggle with the most, and they're the things that are missing the most.
Can I reframe this?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Because no, you can't.
No.
I've already decided.
It's my podcast. I didn't. No.
Okay. No, I want to mess it up because there's something that hasn't been hitting me right about the pursuit of excellence.
Yeah.
And as much as I resonate with pieces of it.
Yes.
And this is what I think it is. I think it clicked.
Okay.
I usually have my best thoughts while somebody else is talking.
We're watching it happen in real time, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. There's 2 things. One, I think I would instead of saying the pursuit of excellence, I would say worship. Because we are made to be worshipers.
Yeah.
And we are always trying to offer our best sacrifice to whatever our idol. And whether that's God or something else, whether if it's your job, you need to sacrifice your time, your energy, you have to sacrifice other opportunities in order to appease this God.
Yeah, I think the reason why I wouldn't go that way is I would view that as much more general. I would view excellence as a thing that can fall under the heading of worship. But I think just as a word icon, when you're trying to communicate the idea to people, I think it's very broad, it's very vague, and it doesn't communicate a thing that's like, okay, you're going to have to get up off the couch and develop skills, take the talents and the resources that God's given you and hone those, sharpen them, become the best that you can possibly be at adding value to the people around you with that stuff that God gave you. So disagree with me, Jesse.
I do disagree.
Go for it.
Because I think, I appreciate what you're saying. I think, and it's not that it's wrong. I think it's just it's trying to plant a tree with a leaf instead of a seed. And what I mean is that the leaf is something that comes off the tree. It doesn't have enough substance to create its own tree. Okay. And so pursuing excellence is a result of worship, properly understood.
Can be, but I think that's not, in our current cultural context, it's not going to be a part of the conversation of worship. And so that's why I'm honing in on this as a specific.
But I think that what that should be then, what we should do, because the Bible talks about it all the time. Talks about in Leviticus, it's like, don't give your, your blind or the lamb that has its genitals messed up. Yeah. Crushed genitals. Don't offer God anything less than your best and your most excellent.
Right. Or the parable of the talents.
The parable of the talents. It's a constant theme. And then in the prophets, major and minor prophets, in the end of the last third of the Old Testament, that's what they're condemned. The people are condemned for is like, you were giving your leftovers. And so your worship, all of the worship was void. Yeah. And so, and what I would connect this to is like our family motto is a rephrasing of Jesus's greatest commands, the greatest commands, which is what Jesus says is love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Yeah. We paraphrase that into love God most in order to love others best. Yes. And so if you get the worship right, you will actually be excellent towards other people.
I don't disagree with any of the words coming out of your mouth. I don't see these two ideas as being incompatible.
I'm not saying they're incompatible. I'm just saying one follows the other. They're not equal. So, okay. The excellence is the leaf on the tree. It's not the seed that makes the tree.
I don't necessarily know that I would disagree with that in theory, but again, in practice, like you gotta actually do stuff to live life, kind of a mindset. Totally. That's more what I'm focusing on. I'm not saying that any of that is wrong. And
I think we're starting to talk past each other because what I'm saying is if you aren't being excellent towards other people, and you aren't doing excellent in your job, and you're not pursuing a life to become the kind of person who adds value to other people and to the world, that loves their neighbor as themselves, then the problem is not the problem will be repaired not simply with learning the skills of learning how to do those things better.
Yeah.
Those are necessary and need to be pursued.
Yeah.
But it also is a heart theory problem.
Yeah.
Where it's
right. And I think the word theory, I think that hits on why we're talking past each other. I think you're talking music theory and I'm talking practicing the guitar.
Yes.
And that's more,
I'm just going to say it, even if it's a clip you edit out.
Yeah, fine.
But just remember, I think I have a concern with pursuit of excellence being the thing, because I'm not sure how compatible that is with justification by faith.
I would say that it's not, there's a difference between, it's not so much about what you're doing, it's about why you're doing it. If you're doing it to receive justification, then that is not the right reason to pursue excellence. If you're doing it as an outpouring of what God made you to be and the purpose is, his highest purpose is for you, then that is absolutely a necessity.
Totally. And I would completely agree with everything you just said. But that's why I think starting with worship is so important.
So I think that's why it's probably better to frame worship as the foundation for all of these points.
Yes.
If they are not pointed towards God's purposes for you and towards
imaging him.
Because
God is these things too.
Yeah. If your heart position is one that's opposed to God or that's focused on self, it doesn't matter what you practice. The fruit that you bear will be about you and about exerting your vision and your will and imposing your will on the world. And it will end up being, it may get you some momentary gain. I mean, how many proverbs are there about like, hey, the wicked man may benefit for a moment, but it all will come to ruin eventually.
Totally.
But to help those guys who are in that place where, okay, they need a jump start.
Totally.
They need what are some things we can do for okay, let's get to practicing the guitar.
Yes.
Because I think going back to the John Mark Comer theory of practice informs who you are, I think it isn't one or the other that starts it. I think they're reciprocal things.
I would agree with that. That's well said. So you can begin to reset your worship.
Yeah.
By beginning to pursue excellence.
Yes.
That's an aspect of it.
Yeah. And that can also be for guys who struggle with motivation, that can be a motivation as well.
Totally.
Of like, hey, if I want to please my creator, this is one of the ways that I need to do that.
Yeah.
And because it can be difficult to figure out sometimes, like, okay, well, I'm supposed to love Jesus back because he loved me first. But what does that actually look like? I mean, I go to church, I read my Bible. Can I give like
the dumbest example of this?
Yes.
Okay.
Get stupid.
For me, and I think that you're exactly this, hopefully this community, you tell me if it's on track.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in the process of kind of I have my 4 young kids. So I'm a busy dad. And so I'm trying to reset the time I spend praying, reading my Bible, spending time with God.
Yeah.
The number one indicator that will lead to success in me getting up and reading my Bible and praying and just spending time with Jesus is if I brush my teeth the night before. So if I brush my teeth the night before, and then I put my notebook out with my special fountain pen and my Bible, and I lay them out, and then I go brush my teeth, and then I go to bed.
Yeah.
If I do lay them out and brush my teeth,
then
I'm gonna get up the next morning because I'm ready to get up in the morning.
Jesse, that's incredibly stupid, but it is exactly the type of thing that I think we're looking for. And it actually does play into the thing that I had written down here, which is a bit more general, but it's that exact thing.
Yeah.
Developing excellence. If you want to get good at something, it takes discipline and consistency. Totally. So if you want to get started moving that direction towards becoming not just okay at something, but excellent at it, you're going to have to start small.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, been studied for ages upon ages. if you try to take on a huge chunk and start it, I'm gonna start this gigantic new habit or practice or whatever, the chances of you actually keeping going with it are not good. If you start with very small things, but you just get in the discipline of doing it consistently and regularly, that can help get you started. And that example, it's similar to what the guy who wrote Atomic Habits. That's what he talks about with like habit stacking. You like tell yourself, when I do this, I will then do that, and then I will do that. So
totally. And James Clear, is that right?
Yeah. Something along those lines.
Excellent book.
And that, you're also going to have to figure out, okay, what are the talents that God gave me? What are the resources that I have available? And,
totally.
What
do you want to learn how to do?
Yeah.
I was thinking
what value do you want to add?
Yeah.
Or are you most capable of adding to the people around you?
Totally. And I think, I don't know if this is a practice or not, but one, I would discipline yourself to only buy or spend a certain amount of money on consuming like a month. Like that's set really a budget for yourself, because you have to start.
I don't even do that.
You just have to begin to set your consuming versus producing.
Yes.
What any society needs more than people who spend a lot of money on things they don't need is they need people of maturity and character.
Yes.
And that's what we want to become.
And that's an excellent practice to start with that I didn't even think of that, because there's so many, there's different areas of your heart that affects. Like it takes discipline. It takes, you have to get good at saying no to yourself.
Yeah.
Which is something that we are not good at at all. I mean, there's a lot of addictive struggles that we deal with just from that consumeristic programming that we have.
Totally.
To the point that we never say no to ourselves, whether it's a cookie or porn or whatever it may be. But
or
starting
book
or books,
or guitar pedal or whatever.
Yeah, that's a big problem for me. I just bought another one on Sunday, so I have a problem.
You really need to hear what I have to say today.
Yeah, this is speaking to me. But yeah, that's a good practice to get yourself out of that habit of saying yes to yourself all the time. You also don't feel very good about yourself when you give in to yourself all the time.
No,
you feel weak.
Totally.
But if you can start small with just something as simple as starting a budget.
Yeah.
You get in the habit of developing a discipline, developing a consistency.
So just even leaning into this a little bit more, getting really practical. So this is just something that my wife and I do. I know some other people who do it too, but we have Cash App. Yeah. And with the Cash App, you can, that's dumb. Anyway, Cash App is its name, so I have to specify it's the Cash App.
Yeah, that's dumb.
Anyway, yeah. But they have a cool thing where you can actually get like a debit card. And so what I do is I have a set amount of money that is on the first of every month is sent to my card. And so it just auto refills to an amount. Let's just say it's $100.
Yeah.
So I just get $100 on my Cash App card every month. And then at the first of every month, and it doesn't get to refill until the end of the month. And so I get to budget how I spend that, but I'm functioning within limits. I don't carry a credit card with me.
Yeah.
I don't I just have to exist in this. And that happens at the beginning of the month. And so, any books or eating out or any whatever I want to do, if I really want a new, this $150 thing, then I need to, for 3 months, spend only 50 of those dollars, instead of 100. Cause people can't carry cash around anymore. That's just not the way our economics work.
Right. The Dave Ramsey cash envelope thing doesn't
doesn't function. But
that's the same idea.
But it's the exact same idea. And it's oh, well, the card's empty. All right.
Wait, maybe I missed this. Does it automatically fill that up every month, or do you have to go in there and do that yourself?
It automatically does it.
Okay. And I think that's important, because that is, sometimes there's this barrier, this entry barrier for starting habits like that. It's but that takes so much investment. It's nope. Sometimes
super easy. It took less than a week for me to get the card.
Thing he talks about in Atomic Habits is sometimes there's one-time activities. One thing, you do it once and that sets a habit in motion.
Yeah.
And that's exactly an example of one of the things he's talking about. But
I would also say, I think something that's good to do practically to get excellent is, I think we are, again, leaning into John Mark, all the science, all this stuff. We are embodied creatures.
Yes.
And so the state of your body is going to influence the state of your emotions, your spirit, all those things. And so do something physical, do some form of exercise every day.
Yeah, man, I'm finding that I have to. It's not optional.
It's a game changer.
And this does not mean like walking around the office a little bit, although that is better than nothing.
Yeah. It's something you have to, it can't be an accident.
Yeah. Something that you're doing on purpose.
You can't go, well, I took 2 loops to the snack machine instead of 1.
Yeah.
I walked that off. No, but doing something constructive like that, it has to be, you have to, maybe another way to say it is it has to have some kind of conquering element to it.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, I think a core thing of being a man is moving from ease to difficulty.
Yes.
Because life is hard.
Yeah.
And so even if it's like, I'm going to, instead of going through a drive-through, I'm going to shop and cook a meal.
Yeah. Right. Like, I think sometimes men need to do stuff that sucks just because it sucks in order to to know that you can do it, to know that you're capable of handling things that suck.
Well, and I think because what we're conditioned to think sucks is things that limit our ability to produce. But the problem is we're not producers.
Yeah.
So that's actually a lie. It's a deception we're living with, that I need efficiency. I need drive-throughs. I need a Peloton bike so I don't have to go to a park to maximize my efficiency.
Well, and to clarify with that, I think that's mostly, I mean, in a way we do produce in terms of adding value to the people around us. But what ends up happening is like, I get so frustrated with all the slow people in traffic on my way home to work. But then it's just like, man, that drive would have taken 20 minutes less if the roads were empty. Like, let's go back to COVID times. But then I get home and what do I do? I sit and scroll on my phone for 20 minutes. Like, now who's wasting my time?
Totally. So that's exactly right. Because again, the greatest thing that you can add, like even Cal Newport talks about this in Deep Work, your greatest asset is not your ability to clock in and clock out. It's your ability to become the kind of person who can produce content and add value through the content you produce. And cooking, even something like that, you're becoming the kind of person you're becoming the kind of person who knows how to cook instead of knows how to drive through a drive-through.
Yeah.
And that kind of person is more capable of producing content and character that can add value to somebody else's life.
It sounds really dumb, and there's a lot of people going, that's just, but that just doesn't seem like that it really works that way. It's like, it's amazing how small of a thing that you can do to become more capable that will make you feel more confident.
100%.
There are some guys that get that in terms of like, they're willing to be physically uncomfortable, do physically difficult things. Like there's a reason, gyms are packed right now. There's a lot of guys who will lift and stuff like that. But I think one area where guys still shy away and stay in easy territory is socially. And that's why the second of the 5 core components that I talk about is conviction and speaking and acting with integrity, meaning you do what you know to be right instead of allowing other people to influence you in what you do and say.
You're a thermostat instead of a thermometer.
Yes.
You set the temperature instead of acclimating to whatever temperature you're given.
And that can be an incredibly difficult thing to do because I mean, we'll talk more about this in future episodes. I want to get into approval-seeking behavior at some point, and why we do that. But it's especially for a lot of guys who didn't really receive approval from anybody growing up, and they're looking for that. They're hungry for that. It's difficult to go against the grain for a lot of them and say things that will get people to disapprove of you. In order to be a man, you must move from there to the difficulty and the discomfort of being able to receive disapproval in order to speak truth.
Totally. So, I think the core of conviction has to do with is either your identity, who you perceive yourself to be, or who others have, or how you've internalized who other people have told you who you are, or your cause. Like, what are you here for?
Yeah. And so one of the frameworks that I've been looking at it through more recently is we need three basic things. We need a why, we need a what, and we need a how.
Yeah.
If you're going to affect change and actually grab hold of something and exert some kind of will on it.
Yeah.
You need to know why you're doing what you're doing. And that's where I think the worship comes from, understanding of who you are, what you are made for, what your purposes are. Then from the why flows your what. That's what I need to do. Okay, what is the next right thing for me to do in this specific situation?
Yeah.
That is always going to be informed by your purpose and your identity. And then you need the boots on the ground. How?
Yeah.
Okay, I know what to do, but what if you don't know how to do it?
How do I do it? Totally.
And that's, I think, part of the reason why we talk past each other sometimes is because I come from the ground. I'm not a pastor, even though I've done the Bible college thing and I've been serving in various capacities similar to that for a while. I grew up very blue collar. I grew up around auto mechanics and around
you
on
grew
farms.
in a family of mechanics.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, how does it work?
Yeah. That's my dad was like mechanical engineer, like studied physics, and his whole life's purpose is to figure out why things are broken and what the root cause is and what's the specific fix that needs to be done to fix that thing. And so I come from the ground up with most. So you come from the top down, the 100%. Why to the what to the how, and I come from I'm mostly focused on the how, and I work back there to the what and the why. So we do end up just, yeah. But anyways, back with conviction. So just for
how do you develop conviction if you don't know your why?
You can't. You have to have a purpose. How can you have conviction about anything? Yeah, that's a great question. Like, how can you have?
Well, because I'm thinking about you as like a how person.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate, because I think as a pastor, I think we're not good at, pastors in general are generally why people.
Yeah.
And why what people. And I'm certainly a why what person. And so our hows are not good enough.
It's interesting that you say that. I was going to wait till our next episode to talk more about that, because I want to get into like wisdom and the nature of practical wisdom and all of that. And that's an observation that I've had, that exact same thing. And so I want to get more into that later, but continue.
I definitely think that's something that's true.
It's very edifying for me to hear that.
Oh, yeah, no, totally.
I'm not going crazy.
Anyway, so I do think that's true. But oh gosh, I can't see you.
I threw you off your train of thought.
You were so self-congratulatory.
I know. I am one of the worst human beings alive. Sorry guys. I apologize.
Oh shoot, was it? Okay. Anyway, I think what I was trying to say is that I think it's, I just don't know how you could start having conviction without a why.
Yeah, I don't see that either. I don't think there's a way. So
how do you figure out your why?
Yeah. That's the question I'm asking you, dude. How do you figure out what I mean, there's plenty of causes that you can get attached to.
Yes.
But they all tend to have a dead end. And
100%.
They don't have any, and this is, I think, where progressivism and the climate change religion, they are religions. They are replacements for religion, because they give you that sense of purpose and meaning and conviction that flows out of it.
Yeah.
They give you an identity within that structure, but it's all to work towards an alternate form of salvation, which is the perfected utopian state of humanity.
Totally.
But
I have a great Mark Sayers quote about that.
Yeah,
but
I think
it leans what you're saying though totally is so true. My son's on a baseball team, and he always calls his teammates his friends. And I was like, oh, hey, did you have a good time with your teammates? He's like, yeah, I had a great time with my friends.
He corrects you.
Yeah, totally. But I actually think he's deeply wise and insightful in this way. Because that's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
We're looking with someone to walk towards something with.
Yeah.
And that's what the Bible Genesis 1-3 says God, out of his own nature, made humans to walk with him towards something. Romans 8 says that God has made, we have been adopted as sons. And some translations say we've been adopted as children, and that's not what it says in the original language. It says sons. Yeah. And the reason is it's using a specific word that refers to heirs. So what it's saying is, because back then that was a real patriarchy in Rome. Yeah. What we have is not a real patriarchal system.
Y'all are complaining now. You should have seen it.
You should have seen ancient Rome.
Yeah.
When any man was allowed to rape any non-peer. And that was not just sanctioned, but protected.
Yeah. And we're demonetized.
Yeah.
No.
But that's just, that's crazy. Yeah. And that is wrong. No one's saying that's right. But anyway, that was back then. So the whole idea, rabbit, it says sons because he's taking advantage. The author, Paul, is taking advantage of their cultural understanding and saying, whether you were the youngest, the smallest, the weakest, the runt of the leader, even a woman.
Yeah.
You are now an heir, someone who receives the inheritance of God.
Yeah.
In Christ. And so if you don't have that, if you don't know that God is a heavenly good father, his word to you is all that I have is yours.
Mm-hmm.
You can have conviction if that's the word that's spoken over you.
So as far as developing conviction, because that's always the direction that I'm gonna pull. I'm gonna pull the reins. Is how can we drill down from our why to our what to our how?
Okay.
What are some things that we can do to figure out our specific purposes? Because we have our general purpose. Mm-hmm. How can we figure out our specific purpose and then exercise the muscles of acting with conviction and integrity?
Mm-hmm. I think purpose really helpfully connects to the idea of vocation. And Tim Keller, who just died this last Friday.
Yeah.
But what Tim Keller said was, he says, you discover your vocation. How do you discover your vocation? Or discern your calling or your purpose? You find your strengths. What am I good at?
Yeah.
You discern your passion. What do I care about? And then you identify opportunity.
Yeah. Yes, because I've heard that framework before. And I think that's always, if you don't know, if you haven't received like a specific calling from God, like God has spoken to you and said, I want you to do this thing.
Yes.
I think that is an excellent Kickstarter, an excellent way to at least get started moving so that you're not stationary.
Totally.
The old saying, God can't steer a parked car.
Yes.
Just but we always have to throw into that. Yes, God can. Look at Jonah. He can call you to do things that you don't have a passion for.
Yeah.
Or I'm reminded of a mutual teacher of ours who we can't really talk specifically about him because he's still on some like government watch lists in other countries and he can get in trouble. But he felt God strongly calling him to translate the Bible into another language in a hostile country. And he got rejected by the missionary organizations that he was applying for because they're like, you don't have language aptitude. Like you just can't do it. You suck at words. You can't words good. But he was so convicted and so strongly sure this was what God wanted him to do that he just, okay, I'm just going to have faith and just go do it. Now, a lot of people hear that story and go, well, yeah, but God didn't do that for me, or I thought he did, but it didn't work. And I thought I was waiting for God to show up and do that kind of thing for me, but it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And I think that the Tim Keller framework is, because we kind of have to remember that there's sort of that God operates through miracles when he wants to, not all the time. Like there's a baseline normal to the way that things work. Yeah. Miracles happen on top of that, and they're done when he wants to display some element of his character or stir people's hearts at a particular time in a particular place. But most of the time he operates through the normal. Because what did C.S. Lewis say? It was something along the lines of, if it was miracle all the time, it would be chaos.
Yeah.
And that's just not functional.
Totally.
So I think that's a good framework to
I think that's a one. Then I found my notes from my professor.
Yeah.
And his framework is, and again, this is unique. I mean, these are all Christian things, but this is very Christian-y, which is, I think part of the problem is we need to start with the who of the gospel. And so it's, we have to start with the gospel. Yeah. So Jesus, the gospel is about what God has accomplished through Jesus's incarnation, through his crucifixion, his atonement, his resurrection, through his life and ministry, and through his exaltation or his ascension to the right hand of God the Father. And there's an identity connected with each of those things. So incarnation, Philippians 2 tells us this, that the identity of someone who incarnates, who gets onto the level of another person, is a servant.
Yeah.
And the calling, how that identity functions, what it does, is sacrifices. And so once you know I'm a servant in this situation called to sacrifice, then you're left discovering the where, when, and how.
Yeah.
What am I sacrificing this time? When do I need to sacrifice? How am I going to sacrifice the thing I know I need to sacrifice in this situation?
Yeah.
I'll just give one other example because I don't want to, there's 5 of them, but the other one is the exaltation of Jesus, that he's victorious, the reigning king at the right hand of God. So his identity is victor. And his calling is to empower. That's what
interesting.
Ephesians 4 does.
Yeah.
And so what a victor does is it's pretty amazing. I mean, it's Ephesians 4 through 16.
Yeah.
Jesus is the victorious king. He's a victor, and he has given gifts to men, is what it says.
Yeah.
So, and these gifts he's given are to people, men and women who follow him, and he empowers them with his spirit to build up the church.
Yeah.
And the world. And so they empower. So that's a calling. So where do I need to empower? When do I need to empower? How am I going to empower?
Yeah.
So things like that. So I think that's also a very helpful framework, because I think we often start with, I think the gospel, Jesus is ultimate reality. And so when we start trying to figure out who we are disconnected from who Jesus is, we are untethered from reality.
Right. And that brings us back to how we kind of started off talking about conviction, which is, if you don't know who you are, you're going to be much more susceptible to needing other people's approval and needing other people to tell you who you are.
Yes.
And your sense of who you are will be a lot more fragile.
Yeah.
And so being a truth teller, being someone who has conviction, requires that you have a strong core of your own identity and who you are.
Yeah.
And to bring it down to the practical level, what that's going to look like is you're going to have to push yourself past take your assertiveness farther than you would normally. Mm-hmm. And I think that can be a really good practice for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I think it's an idea that Ryan Mickler puts out there. You have to train yourself to, and it's not just enough, because I know a lot of Christian guys who they know theoretically that they're a child of God, but they still have that sort of mousy kind of disposition, and they don't really bring a presence to the situation, and they struggle to be truth tellers and disagree with people. Mm-hmm. But for guys that are struggling with that, that's going to mean, first of all, noticing when you are, when you're holding back a truth,
or even something you think,
or because opinion. You're afraid of what another person might say or think or do, or you're not doing a thing. You're not getting started with a project. You're not doing something. The practice there is to, again, same as before, start with small things, start a disciplined practice of taking your assertiveness, speaking up and saying, well, actually, no, I think that's not right. It'll be awkward, and people might not like it. In fact, they probably won't. but you're going to need to test that boundary in order to,
yeah. I think a way that we say that at our church, something I'm trying to instill there, is that if Jesus is alive, if Jesus really forgave our sins and he's really given us the Holy Spirit, and that everything is going to be made new in the end and everything sad will be untrue, then we have the freedom to fail.
Yes. And that's the thing that we've talked about a lot before, is having freedom to fail. Because for most of my life, I did not have freedom to fail.
Yeah.
I was desperately afraid of, stepping out in anything.
Because who you are, you become your failure.
Yeah.
Your failure becomes your identity.
Yeah.
And you have conviction about yourself as a failure.
Yes.
And I
that
feel
was for a long time the only thing I was convicted about for myself was that.
But if our identity shifts to child of God, then my son, just using baseball as a super, men should be listening to this. Men should play baseball. Says the curmudgeonly 33-year-old. Whether he hits, he had 3 straight doubles.
Yeah.
And he was very proud of that. But he's not anymore my son because he hit 3 straight doubles.
Yeah.
And if he went 0 for 4, he's not any less my son.
Yeah.
And so it's that when your identity, you can only have the freedom to fail when your identity is, when you really are a child of God and and you have conviction about that.
In a way, it gives you freedom. What do the red pill guys call it? You're outcome independent. That's what I'm looking for.
Yes.
So the outcome of the situation is not dependent on another person. Now they talk about like developing yourself and being your own source and a bunch of stuff that just doesn't make sense because we are a black hole of desire and need and hunger constantly sucking. We can't be our own source. But if you have your source filled up somewhere else, you have your identity rooted in something else, and you're like your son, he knows, hey, dad's still going to love me even if I don't do well at this. You have that freedom. The outcome of the situation is the same either way. I'm still going to be loved. I'm still going to be okay. And so that knowing that, and that's where coming back to teaching the doctrine of adoption more helped for me. That was one of the things that helped break me out of that, was realizing that, I'm not just, God's not just this distant judge across the desk and I'm this criminal that's like, okay, I'm forgiven, but we're still distant. It's like, no, I'm a loved, cared for, accepted, wanted, like he went out of his way to adopt me child. And that's, doesn't change regardless.
Totally. Like in my family, I'm the oldest of 4 and my sister, we adopted my sister. Yeah. And the joke is that we're like, man, you're the best one of us because they chose you. Mm-hmm. Like our family chose you. We were just what was going to come out.
Yeah.
But we chose you.
Yeah.
And be chosen.
It hits different.
It hits different.
Yeah.
To know that, everyone has been picked last at some point.
Yes.
And everyone knows, and it doesn't have to be a sport necessarily. It could be anything. It could be to be a part of a band or to be involved with an art project or some kind of renovation or construction project.
Yeah.
You really like doing that kind of stuff, but you weren't asked. And so especially men, have experienced the futility of not being chosen for a task. Adoption means that you have been chosen not for what you can produce, but for who you are.
Yeah.
In relationship with God. And because of that relationship, you will receive opportunities to utilize your gifts and abilities the way in ways you could never imagine.
Yeah.
And that gives you the freedom to fail. And that should, and the purpose of that, wrapping it around, is it should make you make you assertive to go, I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
Like I think
it's not a mistake for me to be in this room.
No.
I know a lot of guys, I know a lot of guys who they enter the room and they know that they belong there.
Yeah.
It does not matter where they go. They totally belong in that room. Everyone else is their guest everywhere they go.
Yeah.
And then you've got the guys that are like, they're super unsure. And this is more where I fell on for most of my life, of just like, you're unconfident, you're like, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be there. But if you have that, hey, I'm good, I'm okay, nobody here can hurt me, I'm a child of the person that owns all of this. Yeah. It's okay for me to be where I am and to say things and to do things.
Totally.
That can give you freedom to exercise your conviction.
Sorry, to bring it into some of those practical things.
Yeah.
Just a couple quick thoughts. I think how part of being a Christian means that the ends never justify the means. So, I think the balance for that is perfectly set by Paul.
Yeah.
When he says, speak the truth in love.
Yes.
And so being assertive should never be a harsh event.
Yeah.
But it should actually be gentle.
It can be passionate.
It can be passionate. And that's a really good distinction.
And I think, because some people might interpret that to think, well, then does that mean I just need to be a nice guy? And I think that the difference is harm. Are you harming that other person with your words? You're tearing them down, or are you if they're saying something stupid, are you attacking them as a person, or are you attacking the idea?
Totally.
So I think it's good to get passionate about speaking truth towards bad ideas.
Totally.
But not so much towards bad people, because we all kind of suck.
Yes. No, totally. Well, and I'm even thinking too, I'm trying to think of things in really, because I'm trying to think of practicing where in areas where there could be different points of view legitimately. So like there are some things that I think the Bible teaches and God thinks are just wrong, and there isn't a right answer.
Yeah.
But there are other things like Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is one of the best games ever made, maybe the best game ever made. And someone could have a different opinion on that. But figuring out how to say in that conversation, say we're having that conversation.
Yeah.
Tears of the Kingdom is the greatest game ever made.
No, it's not.
Okay. So things to practice in this situation. Ask questions to get clarity. Interesting. What would you suggest is the best game?
I would have to say Mass Effect 2. It's one of the best written games. It got one of the best, storylines of all time. So, and that's what I prioritize personally, is storytelling in video games. So,
okay, I can see that. And then we've got clarity. So just asking questions for clarity instead of reacting out of our impulses. Yeah. Because we have that. Because I even felt it when you said the wrong answer, that Mass Effect was a better game, and of that, like, I guess I should just not share my opinion. You can share your opinion and go, okay, well, I understand you better now. Said I prioritize gameplay mechanics or freedom, like the sandbox. I prefer sandbox games. So I can see why you would prioritize a story game versus a sandbox game. Yeah. So then you get clarity there. So I think that's really important, is instead of responding with a no, you're wrong, responding with an intent to understand is really practical and very, very helpful. One of my favorite questions to ask is, interesting, tell me more about that. Yeah. Like if you don't know what to say in a conversation, because people are happy to talk about themselves. Yes. As you just go, interesting, tell me more about that. And you're like, what do they call that? A life hack? Yeah. That's a life hack question.
That is for sure a life hack question.
But that doesn't mean you have to change your mind. Yeah. You can go, I disagree. I still think it's a better game, but I really understand why you like Mass Effect 2 so much. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Then everything's good. And honestly, I think for some people, they're so squeamish. That's where it has to start. But maybe it's about a big thing. Yeah. That's still a good way to start that. That's still, you're still going to start
a political debate or something where it's super contentious. Totally. You have a lot of preformed ideas of this is what's correct, capital C correct, and what's not. And yeah, just instead of going, well, no, here's why you're wrong. Here's what the facts say. The facts don't care about your feelings. Well, facts don't care about your feelings, but people should.
Totally.
So
that's exactly right. You are not a
questions.
fact. You are a human, and the other person's a human. I love that. That's great. Yeah. And so asking questions. If it could be a huge political debate where it's like, there's only one right answer in your mind.
Yeah.
And instead of telling them that they're wrong and facts don't have feelings, but instead responding in, with, oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
Yeah.
That's instantly disarming. Even to the other the emotions are going to slow down. And then what you can do, and this is just like super basic, like persuasion stuff, is you listen and you might not agree, but you affirm what you share.
Yeah.
Affirm what you can agree on. Hey, you know what? The thing that we both clearly like is games that are really long.
Yeah.
And whatever, and have really compelling main characters.
Right.
So you can agree on something.
Because people don't care about how much conviction and passion you speak with if they don't think that you care about them as a person.
That's right.
So if you can establish that rapport and
you've shown that you see them as another person instead of another idea. When you say, oh, you're proving that you listened well.
Yeah.
If you can go, you said this and I agree with that.
Yeah.
We share that. Mm-hmm. You're creating a bond and showing that you actually listened. You have proven that they were worth listening to. Mm-hmm. And then when you do that, then you've created a window and an opportunity for them to reciprocate what you have modeled towards them.
Yeah.
And maybe they won't. Or maybe they will. Yeah. And quite frankly, most of the time people do. I mean, I've talked with, again, I'm a pastor, gender identity, LGBTQ stuff, abortion, you name it. I've had to talk with people about death, euthanasia. I mean, these are the conversations that I have with people. And so most of the time, like, I'm yet to have someone barge out of my office or my study or out of the restaurant. Oh, and again, not that I'm like the greatest person ever to ever have a conversation, but it's really that simple. I just go, okay, I want to understand. God cares about this person. So I need to understand what God loves about this person and where they're coming from. I should affirm the things that we share and likely that God cares about. Like, they probably care about something that God cares about. They're just going about it the wrong way. And then I give them the opportunity to reciprocate the posture that I'm God's, how I think God would want them to be treated. And that doesn't mean I change my mind, and it doesn't mean I back down.
And it also doesn't necessarily, that does not mean that you're affirming their viewpoint either.
Not at all.
Listening is not the same as affirming. And I think that some people are afraid of that.
That's 100%. Listen, you can't disagree or agree without listening.
Yeah.
Assuming is not agreement.
Right.
Or disagreement.
And you want to make sure that you are in charge of yourself in that moment. And so I think it's important that, what you're saying about because what that does is that calms you down. You need to be in command of yourself in the midst of that conversation. And
be a non-anxious presence.
Yes. And if you ask them a question, that gives you a chance to calm yourself down and think and process instead of reacting and letting your feelings take over and control you.
Yeah. And that goes back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Are you going to be are you as a man, are you going to let this conversation be under the influence of the flesh or under the influence of the spirit?
Yes. Correct. Let's speed run through a couple of other things. Decisiveness. So Michael Foster has this interesting quote: "An army with everyone in command is an army in confusion." Mm-hmm. And I think we see that there's a definite, because again, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, people rebelling against the idea of the patriarchy and male leadership in the household, male leadership anywhere. Mm-hmm. But I think what you end up seeing is, if everyone's in command, nobody's in command. Mm-hmm. And there's a way that a mutual friend of ours, Justin Thomas, put it, which is it's not so much about authority and who's making decisions, who's responsible for what. Cause like you were saying, there's not really a list in the Bible of this is what a man is and this is what a man does. There's no list of responsibilities and tasks, but there are things that men are held accountable for differently.
Yeah.
And the man is held accountable. Leaders in general are held accountable for the outcome of the souls that God has entrusted them to their care. And it's kind of frustrating if you're a guy and the responsibilities on your shoulders, you're the one held accountable for it, but you don't have the ability to actually make any decisions. And I think because there's been such an attack on male leadership and we've lost that framework of thinking about the headship of the household and men being in charge of anything, guys are afraid to make decisions at all because they don't want to impose their decision on anybody around them. They might also be afraid of failure, which we already talked about. Because man, the guys that I've been living with for the last year-ish are some of the most decisive people I have ever known in my life. They spend very little, which I thought was like, I was like, how do you do that? They spend so little time thinking about what they're going to do, pondering over it, like agonizing. Should I do this? Should I pick that? I one day I was trying to pick a logo for the channel and I had two options. And I was like, hey, which one do you think? This one or this one? And I was expecting him to like take some time and consider it. He looked at one, looked at the other, literally 2 seconds, that one, and walked away. And that was it. That's how he lives his life, is every decision is like that. And he's another one of those people that has that sort of freedom presence of like, I belong in every room that I'm in. I don't need anybody else to approve of me to make a decision. So how can we get to a place where we remove that? We can disconnect from some of that fear of making decisions, that agonizing and perfectionism in it, and fear of what other people might judge us in the realm of decision making.
I'm going to take this two ways.
Okay.
One is I think it's really important to recognize the difference between what the Bible says about a husband and a wife,
yes,
and a man and a woman.
Yes.
Because
this is an important distinction for all the kids watching at home.
Yes. Because, I'm married.
Yeah.
And what our mutual friend, Justin, I think he's awesome. And I totally agree with everything he said within the household.
Yeah.
But I don't have that role in any other woman's life.
Yeah.
Or man's life, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Because that's describing a relationship, how a husband and wife function as a team.
Well, and the reason why I bring up that example is because a lot of guys today grow up in households like that, where the example that they see is a dad who's sort of apprehensive about making decisions because
they see the Malcolm in the Middle Hal dad, Hal and Lois dynamic.
They hear their dad calling their mom the boss.
Yeah.
And being scared of what mom is going to think about a decision that he might make right. So they see that as the example in the household, and that translates to their lives of, I'm not sure if I'm as a boy allowed to make a decision ever. So that's the only, because I agree with you. Yes, there's a very big difference in the household in terms of who's husband and wife and leadership and all of that. Yeah. But that can translate to guys who are not married and who are just, boys turning into adolescents, turning into men who are scared of making decisions.
Or boys who are turning into adolescents and are staying adolescents.
Yes.
Or feel stuck in it and they don't know how to make the jump.
And they want to. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's well said. Like collaboration is not the same and honestly, my wife would even tell you this. She's like, you're the one who has to make the final decision. Because if this goes like this is your call. That's your role in our family. But that doesn't rule out collaboration either.
Right.
So anyway, I want to utilize her strengths and I want to utilize my strengths. And sometimes I might think I have a strength that's actually a weakness, and it was foolish for me to not listen to her.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think those are all good dynamics. We've made that distinction. My question would be with decisiveness is what's the difference between decisiveness and impulsiveness?
Decisiveness is aligned towards a destination.
Okay. And impulsiveness is
aligned toward it's in the moment. I would think of impulsiveness as like, ooh, I see a bag of candy on the shelf that looks tasty. I'm going to buy that because I feel in this exact moment a hunger and a desire for that candy. But whereas if you have a purpose and a direction and a destination that you're trying to reach, you might say to yourself, I see this candy, I want it, but part of my end destination is getting in shape. That does not align to my destination. Decision made. I'm not going to buy that.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that's very helpful. I think that's really good.
So, and I don't think we have enough time to get into it today, but I would like to get into it someday, is how to figure out those types of destinations to align your decisions towards, because I think decision making always it flows out of your why, the why, the what, down to the how, but figuring out what your goals and destinations are, because I think that's difficult for Christians. I think there's a lot of us who grew up in that sort of the sort of let God mentality of it's bad for you to make plans because your plans are always bad and God's plans are good. And so you should never make a target. You should never make a plan or set a destination, set a target, because then you're interfering with God.
Which is literally hilarious because Proverbs aren't promises, but Proverbs says like, hey, make plans. God's going to direct your steps, but make plans.
Yeah. Yeah. So
he doesn't say sit on your hands. That saying that you said earlier, God can't drive a car that's not moving. Yeah. That's very much the idea. We're supposed to make plans and God directs through that.
Yeah. And I think one thing, and just to bring it to a really quick practice that somebody can do today, it's similar to what we're talking about with living out conviction, which is, first, notice a time. Try to keep your eyes open, just take a day or two. Notice a time when you're not making a decision. Or you're allowing something else to make a decision for you. Yeah. Start there and
start with Instagram.
Social
media is making a lot of decisions for you.
Yes. Start collecting a few of those things. Figure out a few things that you want to change in there, and take one of those and start to act with integrity instead of letting that thing decide for you. Do what you know to be right. Yeah. Make a decision that's aligned with something that you already know to be right, because from there you can get in that habit and that process of acting with integrity on instinct instead of having to stop yourself every 5 minutes and second guessing yourself all the time. It becomes a natural response. That's good. That can even help you to figure out as a part of the process, that can even help you to figure out where the areas of your life you don't know what your goals and your destinations are, and why did I let that thing decide for me? Oh, it's because I have no clear target in this area of my life. Yeah. So the next one is I want to look at is accountability. Accountability is not fun, but I think it's absolutely 100% necessary for men in particular. There's this, so I'm always reminded of this quote from that 90s movie with Jack Nicholson. I think it's As Good as It Gets, where he's an author and he's super good at writing these female characters. And this girl comes up to him and she's like fawning and like, how do you do it? How do you just get me? You understand me so well. How do you just know how to write female characters that speak to me? And he just says, I think of a man and I take away reason and accountability. And then he walks away. And she's like, eh. And everybody was dumbfounded by that when that movie came out. And everybody, I'm sure hates that line now, but it was funny because we kind of like most jokes, there's something in it where we're like, I see that happening in real life. And not to like, I'm not throwing that out there as like a disparagement, but the reason why I think that this is important for men is it is something that, yes, all of us as humans are called, we will be held accountable for what we do. Yeah. But there's something about, and I think it might have to do with that sort of headship position of you are held accountable first, where it's like it's a bigger deal for us as men. And I think that works itself out in the way that we act.
But for me, just, anecdotally, I was in a position kind of a difficult work situation that ended up not working out.
Yeah.
And one of the dynamics that was happening is that I wanted to speak honestly and clearly. And I would be like, if I'm doing something wrong, like give me feedback.
Yeah.
And I was never given feedback. And so what I communicate to people is that you giving me corrective feedback is helpful. Like I interpret that as an act of love towards me. And so someone who resists accountability is someone who has not been loved well. Because you've not been surrounded by people who have wanted your best for you.
Yeah.
And people who have not spoken the truth to you. And so, because I think like another part of this, like biblically speaking, the biblical worldview and biblical teaching says that every human is an interpreter of reality.
Yeah.
Instead of a source of truth. We interpret reality. We don't define reality.
Yeah.
And so if I am interpreting everything, it's very possible to misinterpret something.
Yeah.
And so you need someone, it's an act of love to have someone clarify and challenge your interpretations. So if that's someone, I'm really sorry because you have not been loved well.
Yeah.
And that really sucks.
Right.
Because
I think it's a super important thing to say. I think there's a lot of people who probably, if they think back through their lives, that will probably resonate. Because like how many of us who came from broken homes or had a father who misused or abused that
or
role,
brother,
the
or
disciplinarian
sister,
role, or and that can
a friend, a teacher. I mean, it could be any number of a coach, a mom. All of those are possible.
Yeah,
and someone not having someone in your life who can speak who is willing to hold you accountable because they believe in you more than you even see in yourself. That is one of the most empowering things any human can experience. And so it's not the accountability's fault. It's the circumstances you were in. And that's just a bummer. That's a grief. That sucks. The other thought is, I think much like the consumerism thing, we're conditioned for consumerism culturally. I think we're conditioned culturally in the West right now away from accountability.
Yes.
We call Facebook people friends, social media follows, likes. So much of our interaction is digital, which is necessarily non-accountable. Yeah. Accountability is embodied. You can't digital. That's honestly like, maybe this is going too far with it, but this is one of the reasons like a program to like try and block out porn is not as it's not as effective. Yeah. You can't program into the device that is your gateway. Like you can do things and you should do things that can help. Yeah. But that's not accountability. That's a obstacle. Yeah. Accountability is embodied. It has to be relational.
And I think with the social media example, I think a lot of people argue that cancel culture is today's accountability. They call it on the progressive side, they call cancel culture accountability culture. But I think it's important that you point out that social media is not embodied. You are distant. You don't have the full picture. You don't have the evidence in front of you. You don't know the person. You don't know their heart. You don't know their intentions. Yeah. And so it's just sort of just like guilty until proven innocent, straight to the gallows, complete obliteration. It goes immediately from 0 to 100% severe. Yeah. The punishments do not fit the crimes, but that's the only form of accountability that we have in the digital world. Mm-hmm. And you see why it doesn't work. It's like, no, you need people in your life who know you, and like you're saying, have your highest good as their best intention for you. And even if it's uncomfortable and it seems like it sucks, because a lot of times, when you interpret life a certain way and it's inaccurate to reality, that it can suck to hear people say that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, because we tie our perceptions and our interpretations to our identity, and it feels like a personal attack. But
one of the most wise things I've ever heard is when we personalize what's not personal, we turn a moment of ministry or growth into a moment of anger. When we personalize what's not personal, we turn a moment of ministry or growth into a moment of anger.
Yeah.
And so accountability should be not a statement. It is not something that should emphasize your failure, but your potential.
Ooh, yeah.
It's not something that should highlight how lame you are, but how great you could be.
Ooh, that's so good.
And so, I mean, if accountability doesn't, and so if it doesn't feel like that, and there's because again, there's two interpreters involved in that act.
Right. And neither of them are perfect.
And so there's going to be times where the accountability relationship. And I think it's very important for accountability to be mutual too.
Yeah.
Like it shouldn't be, I have friends who are counselors, and I really admire counselors. I'm very thankful for counselors as a profession, but I also have like a distrust of counselors because I think counselors are the new experts on everything. And they're not experts in everything. They're experts in their field. Yeah. And we need experts in that field, but they're not experts in everything. Yeah. And, but I feel like that they're kind of have been elevated to that in an unhealthy way for them and everybody else. And gosh darn it, I was supposed to say something when I said that. That was not the point of why I opened my mouth.
Well, and yeah.
Oh yeah, but a counselor relationship is non-mutual.
Yes.
And so that's a healthy part. It should be even a healthy relationship to have. Yeah. But it's not the same as having an accountability relationship. Accountability relationship necessarily is mutual. Yeah. It's a mutual self-giving and empowering of the other.
Yeah. And to drill down to the practice of that, I think it's actually, if you're a Christian, you're going to church, it's not super that hard in most churches. Like there are life groups and accountability groups and men's groups in particular of all kinds that they exist out there. Yeah. And that can be one of those sort of one-time actions that you can take of, hey, I'm going to go to this. I'm going to go to my computer right now and go find one. Another thing that you can do, I was having a conversation with one of the pastors at my church about a similar subject. And what he was saying is this, like, it's an issue of discipleship. And that is what the pastors at your church should be there to do. Yeah, 100%. The example he uses is like, look, when I was first starting out, I was young kid. I came along to one of the older pastors. I was, look, dude, I don't know life. I don't know how to do this. I don't know who. And he came to the pastor and said, hey, will you be that sort of dad figure? Yeah. Because I think a lot of times that's one of the things we're missing. Yeah. One of the pieces we've been missing because we've been removing the dad from the home more and more. Mm-hmm. And is that father-son accountability relationship. But he just went to one of the older pastors and was like, hey, can you disciple me in that way and lead me? And what he said is like, look, I don't know of a single pastor here on the staff that wouldn't love to hear somebody in their church call them and ask them that question. Hey, will you disciple me and show me the ropes of life? Yeah. So I couldn't, and as one myself, I'd say the same thing. Yeah. I'm waiting for people to make that call. Yeah. And in fact, doing my best to initiate it with the people I have in my church that I do have responsibility to pastor and disciple. So if you need that, you can go to Matt's church or you can come to my church, whether you're on the north or south part of Seattle. Yeah. Canyon Hills Community Church. Des Moines Gospel Chapel. There we go. But not Des Moines, Iowa, but Des Moines, Washington. Perfect. We don't want people ending up in the wrong state. No, you won't find me in Iowa. Okay. So but the general idea is find somebody, whether it's a peer or a pastor or somebody who you trust.
Yeah.
Because that's important. It has to be somebody that you trust and somebody who either knows you or can know you.
Yeah.
And get to the place where they know you and you know that they see your potential and they want to unlock your maximum potential as a person.
Yeah.
And start that accountability, set the destination with them and help them or let them hold you accountable for arriving there.
Yeah.
And let them help you interpret life as you go.
Yeah. That's good.
Last thing, most important thing for the discussion of masculinity, generosity. Because without this, every one of those other points that we've talked about turns instantly toxic. If it's pursuit of excellence, it can be a good thing, but without an outward flowing mindset of I'm here to add value to other people's lives, not just my own.
Yeah.
That becomes toxic masculinity. If it's conviction and I'm going to speak the truth and tell truth, if you're doing that or I'm going to act truth, if you're doing that towards your own purposes, your own goals, you're trying to impose your will on the world towards your own visions without a generous outpouring, others focused mindset, that becomes toxic. Decision making becomes toxic.
Yeah.
Even accountability and being in those kinds of relationships you become the type of person that tries to impose accountability on other people through things like cancel culture and things like that, because it's about, I want to administer my vision on the world.
Yeah.
So generosity and having that, instead of being a vacuum cleaner sucking in, I'm a river flowing out type of disposition, I think is the fulcrum that all of these other points balance on.
Yeah.
So
no, I totally agree. And in a lot of ways too, it even goes back to, we've kind of been almost talking about it the whole time in the sense that it's the difference between being a consumer and a producer.
Yeah.
But even to modify it, it's the difference between being a consumer and being generous.
Being a giver.
Being a giver.
Yeah.
Being a producer versus being a giver. And I think you're totally right. All of the reason masculinity can be dangerous is not because any of those qualities are bad or good in and of themselves, but if they aren't acts of generosity, towards God or towards neighbor, then they are ultimately self-serving.
Right.
And
I think one of the most common ways that this aspect, is even generosity itself can be turned toxic, is with give to get mindset and behaviors.
Yeah, totally.
That is one thing.
I call that manipulation.
Yes. That's one of the core elements of approval seeking behavior, which again, I want to get more into that specific element of it at another time. But, we use generosity as a way to get things. Sometimes it's so subtle and so unconscious that we don't even realize that it's happening.
Totally.
And generosity has to be genuine. It has to be truly, I am doing this, I'm giving this as a genuine gift with no strings attached because this is a good thing to do for that person. Yeah. And it does not benefit me. I mean, even, what did Jesus say? Even the pagans give to their friends. Yeah. But who gives to somebody who, can't give anything back to them? Totally.
Enemy love is it's maybe not the most, I don't think it's the most extreme. It's one of the most extreme teachings of Jesus is enemy love. It's that you are generous even when they are stealing from you. Yeah. When they are taking advantage of you. That doesn't change. We don't modify our generosity based on outcomes. Yeah. But on process. And, that's like a baseball thing. They're like, trust the process, process. This is generosity is one of those things where as a man, you trust the process. You choose generosity. And,
I think a good practice that guys could to start it as a habit. Yeah. Is it you're going to have to actually get started with it. It's doing it at boots on the ground. Totally. Doing it at some point. Just buy people food. Yeah.
Take people out to lunch.
Yeah. That's one of the things that people have blessed me with. And that's like, I feel so appreciative of that. Sometimes it can feel awkward because you don't want to
impose.
You don't want to impose on people and make them feel bad about like not paying for things. It's like, no, dude, just bless them with
You're just being generous.
Or just give stuff. Like I was telling the music director at my church the other day, he's just like, I was like, oh, I'm going to Guitar Center. You want anything? He's like, oh, wait, hold on a second. And he goes to his backpack and pulls out a gift card to Guitar Center. He's like, yeah, it's probably like $100 on there. Here, just go take it. Nice. I was just like, that's such a blessing. Like he didn't have to do that. That was his. Yeah. He could have spent that on whatever he wanted. But he just was just like, yeah, hey, go for it. And not a thought
so cool.
to it. It was almost like an afterthought for him in a way. But yeah, when you are a full person, you can overflow. When you are a hungry person, you will always be sucking in.
Totally.
So I think it's not possible for us to have that generous mindset and disconnect it from giving to get without getting filled up first. And I think that connects it back to the why, the what, and the how. Yeah. We got to go all the way back up to, or the who.
Yeah.
That I think we got to go back. You have to start with the person that you're with, the relationship that you're in, which is you're in a relationship with Jesus, he is the only infinite source for your infinite hunger.
Yeah.
Nothing else can fill you until you overflow. And if you're not again, like you were saying before, I admire people who don't know Jesus, who somehow still manage to be seemingly generous people. Yeah. It's like, how do you do that? But yeah, I don't think there is a way to do it genuinely, truly genuinely, expecting nothing in return. Not even a feeling of altruism about yourself. Yeah. Of like, I feel good. You know, I got something out of giving something to that person because I feel good about myself for doing it. Like, you can't genuinely give.
Or that's the kind of person I am.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Until you've been filled, till you're overflowing, until you've been remade into that type of person through the sanctification process of walking in that relationship with the most generous person. Which is the person that decided to give up all of the heavenly riches that he had and come down and inhabit the human form, and on our behalf. So
totally.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
No, it just was, you were saying that and it was making me think of Philippians 2, where it says that though he was in the form of God, had all the attributes and prestige of God, he did not consider equality with God something to be held on to or kept to himself. Yeah. But he emptied himself and took on the form of a servant and became obedient, not just as a servant, but even to death in the most shameful way possible on the cross. And because of that, God has highly exalted him. And that's where, if we're called to follow in the pattern of Jesus, we have to be as generous as Jesus. And then we will also simultaneously experience the lifting up of God because we're his sons now too. Adoption. So that's a good spot to end for me.
Cool. Yeah. So where can people find out more about your ministry in your church? What's your handle? What's your @
My @ Gosh, I don't even know what my Twitter handle is.
Just your website.
My website, the church it's Des Moines Gospel Chapel. So the website is www.dmgc.org.
Okay.
And so that's where you can find out more about me and the church. Otherwise, I'm not really on any social media, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately, I'm not sorry, but sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jesse, thank you for showing up. Yeah.
Yes.
And talking and arguing and all that good stuff for a couple hours. So yeah.
I always enjoy it. We'll do it again.
Yes.